Welcome to this edition of the Baltimore City Trauma Informed Care Task Force. My name is Zeke Cohen. Welcome, everybody. This is being streamed live on YouTube. So to the millions of people out there watching us, hello. Today is February 17th, 2022. Really excited to get into the work tonight. We've got some new folks that are joining us. Really thrilled about that as well. Did want to take a quick moment. I know that we have seen a lot of young people that have been hurt and even shot within the last few days. And I know that that hits us all differently. Having lost former students to gun violence, and because I knew as a teacher and as a nonprofit director, I don't know, it hurts in a certain kind of way when it's a child versus when it's an adult. And so I did just want to name that and acknowledge that, we are continuing to see a lot of trauma in our city and a lot of pain and a lot of suffering. And I think it's important to be honest about that and remain deeply committed to this work and to supporting each other. With that, I want to go straight, take a quick look at our agenda for this evening. We are going to start with Round the Horn. The prompt is one high and one low from the last week. Then we got some new folks to give introductions. Two of them are not new to the task force, but one is. We're going to hear from Tika, Kyla, and Kimberly. We're going to talk a little bit about the summit upcoming, and then just jump into committee work and then wrap it up. So with that, as I mentioned, the prompt for tonight is a high and a low from the week. And Anne, if you do not mind doing the honors, send us to where we must go.
Kyla, I just put both the Kylas in the same room because I didn't know if you were like,
What's wrong with this internet? Yeah, hello.
All right. Welcome back, everybody. Again, good to be with you. I did want to lift up what Debbie asked in the chat. She says, Zeke, can you say something about what the city is doing to prevent gun violence? And I'm not the best person to articulate the mayor's anti-violence plan, but I'm going to ask Anne if you could put it in the chat. It sort of has several pillars. Some are focused on community responses to violence. One piece of it is work around healing trauma. I would say the piece that is most relevant in terms of gun violence is the gun violence reduction strategy, which again, I don't want to butcher, because it would be better coming from the mayor's office of neighborhood safety and engagement. But essentially it involves taking folks who have been engaged in various criminal activity and providing them a pathway out, or alternatively making sure they understand that that we know who they are, and that any sort of violence is not going to be tolerated at all. This is a strategy that city has tried a couple of times. It has not worked in the past. We're in a much better position to implement it because, one, we have a mayor's office of neighborhood safety and engagement that I think is really sharp, and Shantae Jackson is phenomenal and is attuned to knowing what's going on. And two, frankly, we have a lot of money from the federal government that makes it easier to do this kind of work. So I don't think there's any quick answer to what the city is doing to reduce gun violence, but I think it's worth reading the mayor's plan. And I know that he is utilizing a whole lot of ARPA money right now on this very question around reducing violence. All right, so we are now going to head into the portion of the night where folks get the opportunity to introduce themselves. These are up to 5-minute introductions. In the past, people have used PowerPoints, people have done, sort of long form storytelling. It is whatever you want to make of it, however you feel like articulating who you are. This is an incredibly both diverse and talented group of people. It's part of why I love this task force. And so getting to know folks, getting to know who folks are, particularly from their own words, I think is really important. So with that, I'm going to turn it first to Dr. Kyla Liggett Creel to provide us with the first introduction.
Thank you so much. And thanks for inviting me to tell a little bit of my story. I love pictures, so I put together a quick slideshow that kind of highlights some of my story. So it starts with, this is my great-grandmother, and she was a single mother during the Depression. And she really wanted for her son, my grandfather, to be able to go to college. So she became a cleaning lady at the university, because at the time that meant that she got free room and board. And so she cleaned the classrooms while my grandfather went to college. My grandfather, this is TJ Liggett. He graduated from college and got his Master's of Divinity. He is a minister. And as a minister, he went and worked in Argentina. And he also worked in Puerto Rico for 20 years. And he worked with Martin Luther King. He was involved in the civil rights movement. He interpreted for Martin Luther King in Puerto Rico. So he was speaking Spanish to the community and really, helping people get involved in the civil rights movement. He ended up working with 5 Nobel Peace Laureates over his lifetime. And he worked in Argentina and Puerto Rico. And he got 7 honorary doctorates. But as he always said, but I'm not a real doctor. It doesn't count because they're only honorary. So people would call him Dr. Liggett and he would say, I'm not a real doctor, so you can't call me that. As I said, he lived and worked in Puerto Rico, which is where my mom grew up. And so this is a picture of El Morro, which is a beautiful fort in Puerto Rico. And so my mom's first language is Spanish. She came to the mainland United States when she was 18. And so growing up, I was very, very influenced with the Puerto Rican culture, my mom speaking Spanish, going to Puerto Rico growing up as sort of our home and going back as our magical place. My mom met my dad, and right when my dad was drafted to go to Vietnam, but my father was a conscientious objector. He wanted to, he was at Selma, so he was a civil rights advocate, leader. And so he was a conscientious objector and did not go to Vietnam in the military, but he did go for humanitarian purposes. So he went when he was, I think, 21, 22, and that continued for 50 years. My father lived in Cambodia for 25 years. That's the picture of him on the right. He did humanitarian aid and services in Vietnam and Cambodia up until last June. So he's worked with returning citizens, which are people who may have been born in Cambodia, but immigrated to the United States, but because they got a felony charge, they were sent back to Cambodia, even though many of them didn't speak Khmer, had no memory of being in Cambodia. So he helped with like doing a lot of the returning citizen work that we do in Baltimore with getting jobs and housing and ID and insurance. And so he continues to do that. So he created the Returning Citizen Program for Cambodia and has gotten grant funding for the past 20 years to bring returning citizens into Cambodia and support them in their work. That brings us up to my parents getting married and having children. So this is a picture of my sister and myself. We lived in Hong Kong for 2 years. Because again, my dad was working in Asia. My mom was a nurse. My parents lived in Vietnam during the war, and 6 days before the regime change, they were on the last 2 helicopters that took off from Vietnam. And they airlifted out 50 children who had been orphaned because of the war. And so my mom, who was a nurse, said, well, we can take care of a child who has special needs. And the orphanage says, okay, here is this young lady. So that is my sister. And my parents said, well, what's her special need? And they said, well, she's Afro-Amerasian. If the military saw her here, they would kill her. And so my sister was adopted. Little did they know that I was made in Vietnam, and my mom was pregnant as she was being airlifted out and being shot at by the military. So we lived in Hong Kong for 2 years, and then we moved into Shaw, Northwest DC. We lived across the street from this church, which is Shiloh Baptist Church. My parents, because it was a transracial adoption and they saw, my mom, my dad, and myself were all white, but my sister was African-American, that they wanted to make sure that we were raised in a community that more reflected the African-American culture rather than white culture. So my sister wouldn't be isolated. So the church became a center of our family. If anybody's ever been to a Black Baptist church, you start service at like 9 o'clock and you leave Tuesday. That was pretty much us. We were in the church, breakfast, dinner, choir practice, all of it. It was founded by 19 runaway enslaved people, and it was the center of the civil rights movement in Washington, D.C. So Martin Luther King has spoken there. A lot of the marches stemmed from Shiloh. And so this is a picture of the neighborhood I grew up in. And a lot of people don't know that, and they have sort of a narrative about my upbringing, which is probably not accurate. But this is my neighborhood. This is where I grew up. We had, guys who were selling drugs who used to walk me across the street to make sure I got home safely from school. We had, that's what I thought a backyard looked like. And so it was very normal for me to get my candy after school from the liquor store. I didn't see anything different about that. That was just the way you got candy after school. So this is a picture of the choir. My mom is still a member of this church. That is her over on the left. I mean, she's the white lady. It's pretty easy to pick her out. She's the white lady with the white hair. And so this was my upbringing, is that I was the only white child in my church, in my neighborhood, in my schools. And so I was very lucky because I was able to learn at the feet of African-American men and women scholars, civil rights leaders, activists. And it was a very unusual upbringing. For about the first 3 years, I thought I was light-skinned because everybody was like, the light-skinned girl. I was like, is that me? I don't know. So I had to learn that I was not. I did go to predominantly Black elementary, middle, and high school. I was National Honor Society. I graduated thinking I really knew, what education was. And when I started college, I was immediately put in remedial classes because my school did not give me a quality education. So when I started college, that's when I realized I was reading and writing at like the 4th or 5th grade level. And I had to do a lot of catching up. So I did graduate from college with a bachelor's in family studies with a focus on the African-American family. And in college, I met my husband, Stephen Liggett Creel, who is also a social worker. We had our son, who is TJ, who is now 20, almost 21 years old and is a junior at Morgan State University School of Social Work. And then my husband and I became foster parents, and we fostered 7 children. We returned 6. We were able to reunify 6 children with their birth families. And our daughter, who you see here, she was adopted, and she was born severely drug affected. And so we did all the early intervention stuff you could imagine. She is now 12 years old and brilliant and wonderful. This is our adoption day. And so then I got my PhD in 2016 in social work. And so we're lucky enough to still have friends and family of over 20 years. This is our community. This is our chosen family. And as you can tell, we still are very international in our family. So when we talk about who makes up our family, we can pretty much pull out a globe and spin it and say, here we are. This is my immediate family now. And very proud of, as I said, my oldest son who's at Morgan, and then my 12-year-old who is a 7th grader and doing wonderful, and my husband. And so now I am at the University of Maryland School of Social Work, and this is who I am. I'm an associate clinical professor. I'm the director of the Collaborative, a healing-centered community, and director of the Healing Youth Alliance. But my greatest joys outside of family and friends is really the work that I've been able to do in Baltimore. I've worked in Baltimore for over 20 years as a therapist, as a community organizer, as a partner, as a support. And so I'm just very grateful. So that's my story. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Well, what a fascinating, just a whole bunch of different experiences went into that one. So that was super interesting. Super pumped you're part of this task force, Kyla. The work you do, particularly with the Youth Healing Alliance, I found really inspiring. So appreciate you. Give a big virtual round of emojis or whatever we do to
Thank you.
Dr. Kyla Liggett Creel. Awesome. All right. Up next, Tika Torres has been with us for about half of our existence as a task force. I've been thrilled to get to know Tika. Tika does exceptional work at Planned Parenthood, and really, really, really excited to learn a little bit more about you. So Tika, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Like Zeke said, my name's Tika. Tika Torres Bolivar. I took my wife's name too. I don't really use it everywhere. It's funny, but you know, Hispanics, we love the 1,000 names. So I did come up. I made a little bit of a like a slideshow with some pictures because I am very visual as well. So let me try to share that. Great. Is everybody able to see it? Yeah, awesome. All about me, yeah. So yeah, I am Cuban American and I love to talk about my Cuban roots. And I was born and raised in Miami, Florida. Grew up there, but in this picture, you'll see a bohío in Cuba. That's the kind of structure my grandmother, which is right here on the right in the middle, hugging me after a baseball game. She was born there in one of those. They're basically huts on the beach with palm trees for roofs and an outhouse in the back with potable water from the rain. So yeah, she came to this country. Down in the bottom, you'll see Freedom Tower in Miami. When somebody says Freedom Tower, that's what I think of, not New York. I think of Miami. And that's the first building my grandmother was brought to when she arrived at the airport. They took all the immigrants to this building to get their papers, all the Cuban immigrants, that is, in 1966. She was 6 months pregnant with my mom, so my mom got lucky there. On the bottom right, that's my otra abuela. This is Lucrecia. She was also born in Cuba. So yeah, all my grandparents were born in Cuba. Really hard time trying to find some pictures of my grandpas though, so that didn't happen. But like I said, I was born in Miami and grew up there, Little Havana to be exact. That picture at the bottom has a nice little mural and the corner store from my house right there, La Esquinita, where you can get coffee and pictures of famous people because they start walking around, you know, the imitators. So yeah. And then the second picture, this here is my parents and my siblings, my sisters. And the right here, that's me and my mom at Hershey Park. And the bottom, that's me and my mom at Pride down in Southern Maryland. And in the middle, those are my three sisters. We're like stacked from bottom to top. So you'll see me, Nicole, Yamili, and Ashley. Yeah, a bunch of nerds. I love them and hate them all at the same time, right? In the top right, that's my stepmom and my dad. And at the bottom, that's me and my Uncle Al. Everyone in this picture is what motivates me in my life. I mean, they really make me happy. Talking about them, talking about my achievements with them, showing them what I can do. It really is what motivates me. Along with my wife, which I have slides of later. But so a little bit about my schooling, a picture of all the schools I went to. Top left, that's my high school, Miami Senior High. It's actually the oldest high school in Florida. It is a beautiful building and actually a historic site. So if you ever have a chance to go there, I do recommend you check it out. I went to Miami-Dade College and got my AA there. And I went to work. I started working in a medical office as a front desk person and then became a medical assistant and then became an office manager. And then I moved up here to Baltimore and started working at Chase Brexton and then Planned Parenthood. But between that, I went to Nova Southeastern University and got my bachelor's degree. And that's where I met my wife, actually, in front of that statue there, the beautiful shark. And at the top, you'll see National Coming Out Day. I'm really proud of that. I brought that to my university with my GSA group. We made it into a whole week for coming out celebration and talking about the importance of coming out day for folks, which I'm really proud of that. They still do it today. And last, all the way at the bottom there, I just graduated from the University of Maryland Global Campus. I got a master's in healthcare administration, which I'm really proud of. And I'm currently talking to the boss, so hopefully there's room for growth. Like I said before, I wanted to show this slide because it really helps show both my gender transition and my beautiful wife. And the top left, that's us in college. Before we started dating, we were just friends there. Nightclubs, you know, college. And the bottom left, that's our honeymoon. The middle there, that's our wedding. Yes, I got married in a beautiful Vera Wang. People always wonder about that, but yes, I always pictured myself getting dressed in a wedding dress, and I did. In the bottom, that's a picture of her cousin's wedding, and I had just started my transition there. It's about 2 months into testosterone use. On the top left, that's about a year ago. And then, of course, now is about 2.5 years into my transition. I started my transition really late in life compared to other folks. I started in my 30s. And no, I didn't know my whole life. For some reason, I was kind of ignorant to the fact that transness was a thing. And that's a little different from other people's experience, which a lot of people have told me about. But what I like to tell people is it's all about just being able to express yourself as you are and being able to find open space where you can share yourself. And being vulnerable is pretty hard. I mean, listen to Brene Brown, she'll tell you all the time. So yeah, my transition has been the greatest thing, one of the greatest things to happen for me. It really was what pushed me to finish school. Oops, that's actually my alarm to give my wife a kiss. Yes, I do that. Yeah, the transition, my wife actually was the big reason why I was able to do that. Her comfort and her just the fact that she loved me regardless of anything, that really made it really easy for me to step out of my shell and find myself. Other thing that really motivates me are my pets. Here are my 2 dogs and my fish tank with all my life plants. Top over here, that's Taco. At the bottom, that's Duchess, my little fur babies. As you can see, Duchess loves the pillow. And Taco is a very good watchdog. Last picture I wanted to show is just a bunch of stuff from Florida that I really like. My favorite restaurant at Bub, if you're ever in Miami, please go there. It's lovely. Good coffee and very good sandwiches. Virginia Key at the bottom there. You know, historically, it used to be an only blacks were only allowed to swim there at the beach. And now it's a nature reserve and one of the most beautiful parts of the city, which I find very ironic, a place where they thought was a forethought or something not to be liked is actually one of the luscious and more beautiful spots in the beach. So it's like, haha. In the top right, that's the Everglades National Park. I used to love taking walks down there. The trails are beautiful. Nature is amazing. You can see crocs and birds and just lots of wildlife. And my second favorite thing to do in Miami is take a nice drive. That's one of my favorite causeways there, the MacArthur Causeway to the beach. It is a fun drive and the cops are never there. So that was just my slide on all the things that make me motivate me and make me happy. But at the same time, I want to talk about my work in Planned Parenthood is as a care navigator. And the reason I'm passionate in this work and work for that organization is because of, you know, the traumas that I had to experience, right? I experienced a lot of trauma. Like we talked about ACEs before, adverse childhood events. My ACE score is super high. I saw gun violence, my grandma shooting a gun for protection. I saw my mother be physically, verbally assaulted. I saw thousands of things in my neighborhood, you know, drug use. I myself am a survivor of sexual assault. And all this trauma just shows me how much the world needs more comfort and help, and being vulnerable and being able to talk about that vulnerability. That's the only way that we're going to be able to solve the continual generational trauma, right? Everybody I showed a picture of had some sort of trauma in their life, whether it be seeing their mother abused, like my father had to experience, or my grandmothers, my mother, everyone in those pictures has been sexually assaulted. Why was that the experience? I don't know. Not by the same person, not in the same circumstance, but somehow 3 generations of women all were assaulted, right? How did that happen? So things like that that are just generally tough to talk about, but are necessary to talk about to be able to grow as a society and to kind of break down these barriers. So people know that we're not the only ones, and it's important to just bring it up, right? Apart from doing my work in Planned Parenthood, I'm part of the HIV planning group for the state. So I do like to hear ideas if folks have it on how we can better stop the AIDS epidemic as well. Yeah, these are things I'm passionate about. Yeah, trans healthcare, equitable healthcare. Yeah.
Awesome. First off, let's just give a huge round of applause and emojis and whatnot to Tika. Gotta say, to know Tika is to love Tika, and we love you. That was great. Thanks for being so vulnerable, and thanks for joining the task force. I know you weren't there in the original swearing in, and really thrilled you made it on. So appreciate you being here. All right. Last but not least for tonight, new to our task force and also new to the to her role as the head of, I'm going to butcher it, so feel free to correct me, but I think the head of Youth and Trauma Services within the Baltimore City Health Department. Really, really, really excited to have Kim Legree Sala both here on the task force and within the health department. Kim has no idea how truly excited we are. So pumped to have you on, and I'm going to pass the mic to Kim.
Yes, thank you, Zeke. Thank you, everyone. First of all, Tika and Kyla, your stories were absolutely amazing. I am inspired and genuinely appreciate being able to witness you share your story and tell your story. The thing that comes to mind for me is that healing is possible. That is absolutely what I heard from both Tika and Kyla, and I share that value as well. That I try to champion that throughout everything that I do, is that healing is definitely possible. I grew up right here in Baltimore City. I was born and raised in the heart of West Baltimore in Emerson Village. I had a very interesting, somewhat shared backgrounds with both Tika as well as Kyla, but slightly different. Once again, I grew up in the heart of West Baltimore. If anyone has driven through West Baltimore, Emerson Village, you can imagine in the 80s what that was like. So I, raised by mostly my grandmother, having grown up with both parents addicted, and, navigating what that was like. I was also happened to be a very smart child, and was, blessed to get a scholarship to go to a private school. So while I grew up in the hood, like that's what we call it, EA all day, the rest of my life, 3 parts. In Emerson Village, I ended up going to St. Paul School for Girls in Brooklynville, Maryland, literally from 5th to 12th grade, which is mostly affluent white families. I happen to be only one of 5 Black kids in a school of 300 plus girls, most of my life. And then the third part was church. So completely side with Kyla there. My mom's side is deep Southern Baptist. I'm also an ordained minister. I tell people I'm not your traditional pastor. Like, I can preach, I can do all of that. But the first thing I do is I show my tattoos and tell them, no, you're not going to hell. And yes, these are real. So, I really value the diverse upbringing that I had, having also shared, suicide survivor, attempt survivor, childhood, pregnancy. I had my daughter at 19. All of those things that come with navigating things that we just can't explain as children. So it has really fueled my passion and my work for youth and trauma. Once again, having grown up in the church, I believe that we all inherently, whether you identify as religious or not, even though I'm ordained, I do not identify as religious, I identify as spiritual. I believe that inherently we all are driven by something that we believe in. And that is at the heart of our individual success. And when we are able to tap into the truth of who we really are, regardless of what our background is, regardless of what brought us to this moment, and allow the universe, God, whatever you call it, your peers, to really leverage everything that you are, whether you think it's good or not. This complex world that we live in right now, and all of the complexities and challenges that it comes with, it's very multifaceted, and we didn't get here by it being easy. So naturally, the solution to all these things is going to equally take a complex and multifaceted, diverse solution. So I embrace the diversity in all of us. And therefore, part of my personal journey towards healing has been to literally embrace all of the diversity in me, regardless of whether or not I identified it as good or bad. So I did graduate from St. Paul's. I ended up I felt like I needed a dose of, my culture, and I had a culture shock. Like, it's a funny story going to Morgan State, and I ended up finishing my studies with metaphysical science. One of the things that really drive my passion is understanding the science behind the faith that really drives all of us. Knowing that, the drivers of conflict, right? Because all of this work really takes collaboration, and I have dedicated myself to enhancing collaboration strategy in order to take, great visions from point A to point Z. So at the heart of that is conflicts, drivers of conflict, what keeps us from really working well together. And a lot of that comes from interpersonal challenges and the inability to really cope. And so for me, at the heart of that is really understanding what drives our belief system, our personal values, and knowing that even though they're different, one person may be Buddhist, one person may just like yoga, another person may really just like staring at the color blue, and it still produces the same chemical reactions and, in the biochemistry of beliefs and emotions in the body. And once we understand that we really share that inherent belief and will and drive to survive, like, that is the connector. So I am now at a place in my life. My daughter is a senior at Howard University. She is absolutely beautiful and amazing. And she's 22 now. I'm really about to be a true empty nester. She doesn't live with me anymore, hasn't for years. She's really well at supporting herself. But her and hopefully my future son-in-law move into Bali this year. So I am now I don't even know what to do with myself, guys, to be quite honest. I thought that I figured that out when she went to college. So now I see Zeke said his daughter is 4. So now I'm like, what do you really want to do with your life? But once again, I'm happy to rejoin the team at the Baltimore Health Department. I was part of that team previously, and then took a brief hiatus to support our, teammates over at the Baltimore City Police Department. The core of my work now is really as a subject matter expert with the intersection of public health and public safety. Once again, I'm really passionate about what drives healing, and supporting individuals, whether we are serving or whether we are on the other side of the service. It's all is dependent on whether or not we are in a healed space and a place to cope effectively in order to do the work and receive the work. So the intersection of public health and public safety is at the center. And Zeke, I am part of the leadership team at the Office of Youth and Trauma Services. I am the one of 2 assistant directors, and I will be focusing on strategic partnerships, which is what I love to do, strategy and collaboration. So I'll be supporting the Healing City Act, the governor's mandate for Handle with Care, and really integrating strategies that focus on identifying gaps in our systems and gaps in our services for youth and their families, particularly around trauma. So I'm really, really excited to be here and excited to share in the work with you guys and to continue healing with all of you. So thank you. I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. Give it up for Kim. Super, super excited to have you on board. it is really good to have this kind of energy, and welcome to the Baltimore City Trauma Informed Care Task Force. Great to have you here. All right. Give one more round of emojis and little heart things and all the rest. And while you are doing that, let's talk briefly about the Healing City Summit. The Healing City Summit is coming up starting on, tell me if I get this wrong, Anne, but February 28th is the first day. Fantastic. Anne has been hard at work putting together these incredibly dope little boxes that you get if you sign up for the summit, which is an inducement and a bribe to you all to sign up now for the summit, because you get a box, and in the box is some caramel. At least last time there was. I hope there is this time. Great. There's a Healing City shirt. There is this whole literary thing with poetry and shares some of what we're doing. There's stress balls and all kinds of cool stuff. Thanks, Iris, for putting the link in the chat. Last year, it was great. This year, it's going to be even greater. But I do need you all to come through. We have an amazing list folks who are going to be doing panels and speaking, some of which I see in front of me right now. But if you get a chance, check out the speakers list. It is just a who's who of incredible Baltimoreans who are deep, 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 deep in the work. And it's going to be, like Kim was saying, just a whole week worth of healing at a time where our city really, really needs it. So come through, because it's going to be a lot of fun. Any questions about the summit before we talk about the videos for the summit? Okay, great. One more thing, excited to have Bessel van der Kolk there. He was the gentleman that wrote The Body Keeps the Score. If you haven't read that book, it's really worth the read. Has definitely helped how I think about the impact of trauma and how it is felt throughout our bodies and different modalities that we can use to heal from it. So anyway, he's going to be one of our speakers as well, and I am excited for that. So with that, let's talk a little bit about these videos. I'm really excited to have our task force represented. I thought, like I said, I thought the best way to do it would be to have these short videos that, really just share who we are as individuals, who we are as a collective from the perspective of our subcommittees. I know that Anne and Iris have been working to get these scheduled up. I know that we've got our guy, Nicholas, who is a phenomenal videographer, who's going to be working with us on this. We're in a little bit of a time crunch at this point, but we are going to get it done. And these are going to be awesome. And hundreds of people are going to get to see the work, which is great. So just real quick, and this is in the agenda, but for the youth group, I know that Kyla, Ryan, and Diabre are going to be meeting on Friday from 1 to 2 at the University of Maryland School of Social Work. For policy, Fariha and Councilmember Ramos, I think you all got to find a time and a place to meet. If you want to do that tonight, that would be great. For the medical group, I know that Dr. Lindsay and Dr. Panagis are going to meet up on Wednesday, the 23rd at 10 a.m. at Mount Washington. For decolonizing, Shauna and Jasmine, Friday the 11th at 10:30 in Shauna's neighborhood. And then for the training group, everyone, all y'all, at the Southeast Anchor Library which is on Eastern Avenue at 9 a.m. on Tuesday, February 22nd. Anne's gonna be there, Anne or Iris, for all of them. So don't like stress out. We're gonna walk through it together. It's gonna be, these are gonna be good little videos, but there's no, don't stress out about it, because it's gonna be fun. All right. Any questions about either the summit or the videos? I don't know if you guys can hear it, but my daughter is deep into Bluey in the background. Bluey is great for those that don't have little kids. My wife and I sometimes watch it. It's awesome. All right. So with that, so let's go into our committees. I know that several folks are deep into their first goal. As a reminder, the action statements can be found here and in the agenda. But yeah, Anne, if you don't mind putting folks where they're supposed to go.
I just reposted the agenda in the chat so people can get to their documents easy. Youth group, you will be staying here on the main screen for tonight. Zeke is going to start with your group, and I think that's it. I'm gonna bloop to the medical group, and then I will come talk to decolonizing. So rooms are open for people to be able to get to their rooms.
All right, good evening, everyone. Nice to be with you all this evening for the youth work group. Councilman Cohen, did you want to share the update about the plans for the 3rd and then move from there?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, I know during the last meeting, you all met with a representative from the Mayor's Office of Homeless Services to give something of a background on sort of how they're thinking about youth homelessness. I thought it was important heading out of that meeting to also get you all connected with sort of the leadership of MOHS. So on March 3rd, which is our next task force meeting, Bill Wells is going to join us. He is the deputy director. He's really sharp. He's a good guy. And I really want for that to be more of an exchange. Bill is in a position where, he has decision-making capability. And so my hope is that we come to that conversation both to listen, and I think he's going to give like a slightly deeper look at what MOHS is doing specifically around youth, and also specifically around some of the ARPA asks that they've made. ARPA, again, is the American Rescue Plan Act money. It's the $643 million that the city got from the federal government. And MOHS has made several asks, some of which involve keeping the hotels online. Folks will know that during COVID, the city acquisitioned a bunch of hotels, both for sort of staging space for COVID positive people, and then also to provide non-congregant settings for our neighbors experiencing homelessness, because that was really important as a sort of a best practice around health and keeping people well. So I know that is one of the things they're going to try to do, is keep the hotels. There's a bunch of other asks that they have, but in essence, my hope is that both he is able to present to us, but also I want us to come to him and really have, we don't have to have like a fleshed out plan, but like, here's what when we think about youth homelessness, when we think about reducing it, here's how we can be helpful. Here's how we'd like to contribute. Here's how we are. So that it's really, an exchange more so than just like a presentation. Because I think that, you all deserve to have an audience with the folks who are decision makers. And I also think this is a really good opportunity just as a jump off, so that again, as we go into this work, we are conceptually clear on what MOHS is doing, so that we don't end up doing stuff that inadvertently steps on their feet, or that, just is like siloed or not aligned or whatever. I always think you should know what folks are doing before you do stuff. So with all that, want to give back to you all, but did want to just say that next week, Bill Wells will be joining us. And my hope is that we can have a great conversation with him and that it can jump off into some real action. Any questions, comments, thoughts, ideas? Adele, I see you off mute.
Yeah, I just agree. That just sounds good, and I agree. I don't really have anything to say. Just sounds good.
Cool. It's good to see you.
I was gonna ask Councilman Cohen, is he already aware of what we're doing? Because you mentioned like more of a conversation, not a presentation. So how, like, bird's eye view awareness, or like what should we be
so yep. So I teed him up for it. I talked to him a little bit about who you all are, kind of mentioned that it's a sort of interesting set of actors between educators, youth, professors, agency folks, nonprofit people, and that, and did share a little bit about you all's interest in youth homelessness and how we can collectively reduce it. If there is more that you want me to communicate between now and then, I'd be happy to. Bill and I talk fairly regularly, and I've been behind the scenes advocating for his ARPA asks. So if there's anything that you all want to share as we go into that conversation, just let me know, and I'm happy to drop it on him.
Cool beans, thank you.
I think from my perspective, and certainly, other people jump in, I think that this group has clearly identified that youth homelessness is a priority that we want to focus on. But we're really in the information gathering phase, because it's like, well, do we mean this, or what about, and, all of that. And so I think when the representative came last time, part of the discussion was, what would be helpful? How can we support the work? And then, to your point, we really needed to have somebody who's leading to be able to say, okay, this is what would be helpful. So I think for me anyways, that is sort of the ask, is that we have lots of ideas. I mean, we got that, but I think it'd be helpful to hear from him if he's like, well, this is the direction, and what would be helpful is if you all did X, and then we can, move on that. Because I just don't want to go in a direction that's opposite of theirs, or that we're replicating, or, we're 5 months behind or whatever. So that would be my goal. I don't know how other people feel about that.
Yeah, I guess if they had a timeline that they could present to us of things that they're planning to roll out, that would be helpful in knowing how we can assist in some things that they got going on. And something I was thinking about too is that last meeting we invited our Youth Action Board, which is from what I've understood is a part of the Mayor's Office of Homeless Services. And so wanted to just follow up and ask about the budget for compensating young people, because that's something that Youth Action Board has asked about for I know we've been thinking about the budget for workshops, but also like just in attendance of these meetings. That's a side note. And but then also like what is like I think that the Mayor's Office of Homeless Services should make an intentional partnership to like connect this, because that's something I've kind of been just inviting folks to join this meeting, but I think that like that should be like very explicit, like that's something they're working on, and now the city has like created this task force to address some of these issues. And so if that's something that like maybe we could urge him to look into or be more intentional in thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right on, Lydell. And I think, you know, we can set some of the terms of what that relationship looks like. I mean, when I started calling him today to talk about it, he was like really pumped. I mean, I think their general, him and Director Augustine, their general outlook is like, listen, like we need all the people we can get. No one is going to solve this work. Look, I mean, you all know this, but like homelessness is a crisis, certainly not just here in Baltimore, but across our country. And it's getting worse as the eviction moratoria end here and in other cities. We will see more and more and more people that are either housing insecure and living in transitional housing or couch surfing or whatever. And then we're just going to see more folks who are permanently homeless or straight, living in our streets. And so I think it's a critically important issue. I think particularly for children, we know how, it impacts learning. We know how it impacts relationships. We know how it impacts just kids' sense of well-being and safety. And that, quite frankly, if you don't have a safe place to stay and to sleep and to live, none of the rest of it really works. I mean, that's what I think the city is bought into the housing first model, which fundamentally comes down to like, we can't fix people's mental health or joblessness or any of these other things unless they got somewhere to stay and to live. And so I think it's the right issue for this group. And I think from Bill's perspective, he really welcomes the partnership and is looking forward to it.
I also wonder, and I know that we had talked about this before, there is a population of kids who, teenagers who are living in unsafe environments. And even when DSS is called in, it's like, well, you either stay in that environment or you go to foster care. And, and so people are like, well, neither one of those are great. And I think it is leading to kids not reporting that they're in unsafe environments, and or also leading towards kids just being on the streets because they feel like that's more, it could be couch surfing or whatever. And I know DSS does have some innovative programs that they can offer. But that also may be another group that we want to invite in at some time, because there is such an overlap that we see. And I know teachers have said this before, that they have kids who are like, well, I'm just going to stay at a friend's house, or I'll just, and the friend's house, the couch lasts only until the adult says you can stay there. And then, you're asked to leave and you can't go back home. So that may be another partner we'd want to pull in and just say, educate us on what the options are. And is there a gap? Which I think many of us would say we've seen that there's a gap, that none of those options seem good on how to manage.
To add to that, Councilmember Cohen, you might know more about this or have something to add. As a teacher, I've noticed that more and more undocumented students are coming through that are often housing insecure, like we're talking about here. But I was curious because in the data collection we've been doing, if we've touched on any of those individuals, because the numbers are often not included in a lot of the statistics that we're gathering. And I was curious if there's an organization that works. I know we have like the IRC and stuff like that, but I'm not sure if that even touches on the undocumented individuals that we have that are, again, attending schools and that aren't accounted for in our data collection.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. So a couple groups that work pretty closely with undocumented kids and families. One, of course, Casa de Maryland. Usually more on the advocacy front, but they also have some direct programming as well. And I think to your point, Brendan, like data collection is really hard because in some cases, folks aren't trying to be identified. It was like a big thing. I remember during this last census count to like literally go to door. And, as you know, my district is the most, has the most amount of immigrants of any district in Baltimore. And so we spent a lot of time in like Baltimore Highlands and Bayview and Greektown and all these neighborhoods where we do have a large population of undocumented, uninsured, unregistered folks. And we just knock on the door and try to get people to give us, even the bare minimum amount of information and try to communicate really clearly that this isn't going to go on some like, ICE list. But of course, the then president was playing games and making it seem like it would. So it was super difficult, which is why cities like Baltimore were undercounted, because an intentional strategy by the president of the United States to suppress communities with a lot of undocumented people. So all that said, I would say Casa Esperanza Center does really good work. They work with primarily uninsured, often undocumented people. They provide healthcare that is either free or heavily subsidized. So that would be another place I think that could help produce some of that data. And then, also, and it's better than me, but like just our schools, like just thinking about, schools in South Baltimore and Southeast Baltimore, where we do see a lot of kids who may or may not be undocumented, a lot of recent arrivals, like, especially I'm thinking about John Rura. There's sort of been like waves of groups of kids that come. So I would say those would be the three that I could think of off the top, is like Casa Esperanza Center and then schools. And as you know, it's like a little complicated within schools as well to kind of get that data, but that's, I think, where we could start.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions, comments, or anything for the councilman? Councilman Cohen, anything else for us?
Oh, I'm gonna bloop to a different group, but appreciate you all. I think this is absolutely the right focus, and I'm really excited about what we can accomplish on this path.
Awesome, thank you. Enjoy your blooping. Safe blooping.
Also, I would be remiss to say actually that, I also think, frankly, Director Janet Abrahams, who's in this group, is a really good resource. The director heads up HABC, which is the Housing Authority of Baltimore City. I don't want to put her on the spot in any way, shape, or form, but that really is an agency that when folks are either housing insecure or experiencing homelessness, it kind of steps into the void and provides support. I gotta thank the director, because even today, one of my constituents was in a situation involving domestic violence, and HABC was able to quickly move her to a different place, which was incredible and super helpful, and she was extremely grateful, Janet. So appreciate you pushing on that. But I would just say, like, Janet's a really good source for this as well. So utilize her.
Oh,
Awesome.
thank you. Thanks. And I will share with you all, I mean, we're doing a lot of work with with Bill Wells and his team. We do have the emergency vouchers, homeless vouchers that we're using. We have a program for youth aging out of foster care. There's so many programs that we have within HABC. And when we meet again, I will bring the information and the number of families that we have assisted with the assistance of the COC, the continuum of care, because we work through that system with the homeless group in order to address the homeless youth. So I will have some more information for you at our next meeting.
That would be great. Thank you so much. And if I can ask a question, and maybe others have experienced this as well, the gap that I keep coming across with young people is that 17 to 21, who they say, I can't live with my parents. I've laid on all the couches I can, and people are saying, get off my couch. They can't rent an apartment because nobody's going to rent a 19-year-old an apartment. And so we end up having to sort of like call around, and even hotels have said, well, they can't stay here because they have to be over, 25 to rent a room and all of that. And so that's where I've seen the kids that I've worked with end up like, I don't know what to do, because foster care is going to say, we're not taking a 19-year-old, like that's not going to happen. So do you have any thoughts, ideas, specific programs? Have other people seen that as a pattern, that age range is sort of like right through the cracks? Yeah.
I mean, that's why I want to make sure I have all the programs. We are seeing an increase in that population. We have applied for additional vouchers for certain populations, and we were awarded some. Again, we received the 278 vouchers for the homeless families, and that in itself also include the youth, providing that they are emancipated, they can live on their own. We have also started, what we found also is that some of these youth, they want to attend college, but they're unable to do that because they cannot afford the living arrangements and what have you. So we just placed a program in our annual plan that will target some of these youth, and we will offer them vouchers, Section 8 vouchers, where they can attend school and have the benefit of the Section 8 vouchers. And that will pay 100% of their rent. And if they do work, of course, there will be some adjustments on the rental portion of it, but the higher portion will come from the federal government. So, we have that in mind. Tracy Oliver Kaiser, who works with us in our resident services program, she's really instrumental in helping us to develop the right programs within our capacity that can assist. We're limited, of course, because on the federal level, we need folks to drive certain things so that the federal government can isolate vouchers and programs for the young adults. Not a lot of those programs are out there. And so because we are MTW, we're an MTW agency, and what does that mean? It means that we can take a look at the federal regulations and we can change the regulations to accommodate the way we operate here in Baltimore. And then if it is successful, so it's almost like a pilot. And if it's successful, then HUD will introduce it to the other agency around the country. And so we have implemented a lot of programs that are now being adopted. So being here, I'm listening and hearing some of the things that you all are offering. And eventually we can talk about what is the best route to take, what are the best routes to take. And then we can talk about what we as an agency can offer.
That's excellent. Thank you so much. Did somebody have a question or?
I have two questions, if no, I want to make space if anyone else has one too. Okay, but yeah, like I was just one thinking like, so like with like you like being here like, and when we get like Eddie Hawkins and a few other like agencies like into this conversation, like something I've been wondering is like what is that support that agencies like yours are looking for from community partners and like community members, because I think there's a ample amount of people wanting to contribute to the solutions to homelessness and like have like, you know, had their own like issues like falling through the cracks. And so like how do we, I think like one part of it I see is like wanting to have like you all come in and present like what it is that you're already providing, because I think like you're right, like I don't think we need to create a bunch of things when there's literally a whole infrastructure here for this, and it's people's work to be doing this. But I think there's ways that we can, you know, make sure that we support filling in those gaps. So I was wondering like what that might be for like HABC, and maybe that could be something like you also like come back with too next time when like you do your presentation. And then the second thing I was just wondering about was like you mentioned like looking at federal regulations that are like barriers to folks experiencing this, and curious like how we could have input into helping like influence that like regulation. And yeah.
Sure. So the benefit of us being MTW agencies is that one of the things that we do is we take a look at the regulations. For example, one of the regulations that we looked at was as far as families are concerned, where we wanted to get rid of some of the barriers that the federal government placed in the way of folks being able to get housing. So we're able to take a look at some of the requirements and say, okay, HUD, we would like to start a pilot program to get rid of that particular barrier. And and we do some analysis and then we'll present it to HUD and HUD will approve it. And then we have to implement it. So right now there is a program that they're getting ready to start. And it is it's a study that's being done where folks believe that if they give young adults, I think it's between 18 and 24, I think it's $1,500 a month with no restrictions to the funding, that those young adults will make the right decision. And so in order for us to implement a program like that and forgive that income and not calculate it in the rent, that is a regulation that we have to go to HUD and say, we would like to implement this program, and the restrictions on the income, we would like that lifted. So we're waiting right now for HUD to approve it. And when they do, we will partner with the city to implement the program. So that's one of the ways that we can do that. Being a part of this task force, you know, I listen constantly to the things that you guys are suggesting. And of course, I'll take it back to my resident services group to say, how does this look? Take a look at industry-wide, anyone implementing these things. Has it been successful? So listening and hearing what you all want to offer, there's always room for us to make those adjustments. And then one of our goals here at the agency, and we're just kicking that off, is to work with the industry groups to create on the federal and state level legislation that can be beneficial to what we're doing here in Baltimore. So that's another way of gathering the advocates that's out there that are pushing on the federal level and state level the different housing components. Like today, I was part of Housing Day in Annapolis, and we were pushing for the partnership funds to increase so that we can go ahead and start developing more affordable housing units here in Baltimore. So you have those advocates, and we can push through the advocates to get our agenda on the federal agenda pushed. So those are some of the things that we, as an agency, that we're capable of bringing to the table. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, you did. And, you know, it sounds like when we do like the workshops and stuff like that might be a good opportunity to like create a proposal or like something concrete to give to y'all, take back.
Yeah, if there are, let's say, for example, in this group, you all decide that there is an impediment to furthering the youth housing shortage and in the industry, and there's something that we should be pushing for a change, then of course we can get the right people in the room so that we can craft the right legislation to introduce. So like I am a member of CAFA, which is an industry group that pushes housing legislation on the federal level.
So that sounds like a really excellent sort of focused goal that we could work towards is, right now we're in the information gathering stage. So, we'll hear Bill Wells next week or the next meeting. Would you be willing to sort of do your, information sharing about your programs and all of that on March 17th? Would that be okay?
Yeah, I can bring all the information, and we're real familiar with Bill Wells. He used to work for us. So he's also familiar with our program. So not a problem.
That would be excellent. And then, for the folks on the work group, maybe it is us with this information gathering, really trying to think about, is there a specific ask or is there a specific barrier or gap that we've identified that we really want to focus on trying to address? And, like I mentioned, I've spent the past week dealing with exactly that issue where it's like the choices are, do you go to foster care? Do you stay in an unsafe environment, or are you homeless? Those are not good options. Like, we got to figure something else out, right? So, if other people have other gaps that you want to think about, or if that aligns with something that we want to focus on, that, we can sort of ask some real focused questions about, well, what should the young person do? And is there really nothing that they can do, at which point that could be a recommendation for HABC?
Right. And then, of course, again, every year we submit a plan to HUD, and that plan is approved. And so there are, we do have consultants that consistently work with other housing authorities across the country, and they bring us changes that are being introduced. So, I can definitely ask them to put their feelers out to see what type of changes are being introduced or suggested on the federal level that can address that population.
Yep. And I do think that population, we have kids who are in the situation because of unsafe living environments, like interpersonal violence in the home, physical abuse, sexual abuse. But we also have young people who are in the LGBTQIA population who their, parents may just say, you got to get out. And if there was a better option that they could, like foster care has Ready by 21 or the independent living programs that, if you're in foster care, you can get into, but if you're not in foster care, it's hard to be able to access those programs. That if there's something like that, maybe that's something that we could offer to make recommendations around. And we had also talked about doing focus groups and having young people actually ask questions about barriers and that kind of thing. Do you know if that kind of data is already collected and out there that you all have accessed, as far as like youth voice saying this is what our concerns are or barriers?
Well, I know the Mayor's Office of Children and Youth, that office, I know I am part of that, and they have done several community outreach and focus groups, and they should have a good write-up of some of the things that the youth are, that troubles the youth. And I know they did across the entire city when Tisha Edwards was part of that group. So I would start there.
Okay.
Mayor's Office of Children and Family Services, I believe.
Success. Yeah.
Yeah.
Deputy Mayor Leach is now working on that, and I can certainly reach out to see if they have those focus groups and if it's specifically focused on the issues that we're talking about, this gap of kids sort of going right through. And even talking to some of the youth who have fallen through that gap and say, you know, what choices were you given and what choice did you make, which may be a really dangerous choice, but the best of what they were giving.
Right.
But I'll reach out to see if we can, if they have the focus groups, if they have the data, and if it was aligned with what we're talking about.
Okay.
Awesome. I'll try to have that for at least by the 17th when you present as well.
All right, and then I'll have the just a list of what we're doing for the youth.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you for stepping up. I know that it was like, surprise, we're going to ask you a bunch of questions. So thank you.
I'm going to get Zeke later on.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
All right, I'm looking at the time. We have about 5 minutes. You all have the link to the document that we use for the agenda and all of that. One of the things that I'd like to ask, and then I also want to check in with Lene because Lene is here and wanted to get an update for her. But if you all have specific questions that you think would be helpful to ask Bill Wells when he comes next time, if we can put that in that document, and that way we can either send it to him ahead of time or we can kind of go through those questions when he's here, that would be great. So I believe everybody has the link still, hopefully. But yeah, if you can just put questions on there, that would be awesome. Lene, you here with us?
Yes, I am.
Awesome. Hi, sweetheart. Would you be willing to give us an update? I believe you were helping with some of the conversations and things like that. Can you give us an update on what you've been doing on your end?
Yeah, so for everybody that hasn't seen me in a while, hey, I'm Lene. I'm also Healing Youth Alliance. I'm 17. But on our recent endeavors, we went on Heart Smiles YouTube Live and we talked about housing insecurity and youth homelessness. And it was with Gemma, everyone knows Gemma, and Shalal. He's also a part of Healing Youth Alliance, I believe. And one thing that we did mention, I should have pulled up the comments. This would have helped me a lot. But one thing we did mention is like a lot of stuff, because I'm on the youth food insecurity team as well. So a lot of stuff that we kind of wrapped around was a lot of the stuff had to go into environmental factors. So we also got perspectives from other youth, like how do they feel about it? And one thing we did mainly talk about is like people didn't really know what housing insecurity was. So it was kind of like that's where we should focus on teaching people what housing insecurity really is, and how it really affects the mental and the physical, because a lot of people just hear, oh, you're homeless, okay, you're on the street, or you just may not have a place to go, but it affects a lot more than just that. So those were the biggest things we kind of talked about. Any other questions, feel free to ask.
So do you feel like some of, based on the fact that, a lot of kids didn't really know what housing insecurity was, do you feel like there needs to be an educational campaign so that young people know what that is? And if so, what is it that we want them to do once they understand that information?
I do believe if we're gonna target youth homelessness and housing insecurity, I do believe there should be an informational type of campaign, informational setting, talk, forum, something. And it should include I would say personal stories, because personal stories will really be heartfelt and make someone want to connect and understand a lot more. And I think it should be more talked about more often, because in my opinion, it can be the leading cause to a lot of mental health inflections within youth and adults, really, because youth go into adults and they carry that along the way.
And so that is very helpful in thinking about what, if kids don't know that they are housing insecure, which I get. I mean, I've talked with kids who are like, yeah, I have stable housing. I stay at my friend's house on Tuesday, my aunt's house on Wednesday, my grandma's house, and it's like, well, that's not exactly stable. What is it, do you think, that youth would want to know? So if I'm a young person, I go, oh, I actually do have housing instability. Do we want to sort of say, if you have housing instability, this is what you do to get help, or anything like what would you suggest?
I would devise like a planning step that implements the who, how, what, and where of what housing insecurity is. Then I will implement like resources, because you can also inform someone about it. That doesn't mean they always have the necessary and proper resources in order to get out of those situations. And a lot of people, because they don't have a stable home, they don't know a stable life structure. So it's important to teach stable life structures within teaching what housing insecurity is. And also just reassure people know, like, hey, we're here for you. We feel you. We're going to continue to support you.
Awesome. Great. And that could be part of the work of this group, is, really saying we need to get this word out and figure out how to get the information out. And with the information gathering that we're doing now, we're able to identify resources and plans. So thank you so much, Lene. Appreciate you as always and your brilliance. All right, it is 1 minute till 7 o'clock. Does anybody have any closing thoughts before we end for the evening? Okay, so next steps, please write down your questions on the Google Docs so that we have that for our next meeting. And be thinking about, is there a certain focus that we want to look at when planning for addressing housing instability with youth? Are there certain populations or gaps or barriers? All right. Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful evening. See you in 2 weeks.
Good night,
Thank you,
everyone.
Dr. K.
Well, good night.